The Palestinian Papers, they didn't give us a lot of new information, some, but not a lot. But what they revealed is a very weak position of the Palestinian negotiators. I mean, they have, I don't blame them for this, they simply are in a weak position. And that showed in the offers that they were making. At the same time, it showed the total arrogance and contempt of the Israeli negotiators, who assume, and on the basis of the distribution of power in the region, it's understandable, they assume they can get what they want. And it also showed the contempt of the United States. The statements by Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton were dismissive of the Palestinians, were pretty ugly. So it showed something about the attitudes of the participants, which is not a great surprise, but unfortunately it's pretty realistic. As for the prospects, I think the options are not being described accurately by those who have Palestinian interests at heart, either the Palestinians themselves or the solidarity groups. The way it's almost always discussed is that there are two options. Either there'll be a two-state settlement along the lines of the overwhelming international consensus, or else, as Palestinian leaders have said, we'll give Israel the keys. They can take over the whole territory, and there'll be an anti-apartheid struggle on the South African model. Israeli leaders have said the same thing. Those who are in favor of some sort of partial settlement said, well, if we don't do it, we'll face this terrible demographic problem. There'll be a huge Arab population in what we want to be a Jewish state. However, those are not the two options. There's a third option, which is a much more significant one. The third option is exactly what's happening. The U.S. and Israel, working together, are instituting a form of control and domination, which is neither a two-state settlement nor taking over the whole territory, which Israel doesn't want. They've created a framework. It grows out of old plans, going back to the Alon plan, took another form under the Sharon plan, and Olmert had his own version. But basically, Israel takes everything to the west of the annexation wall, it's misleadingly called separation wall. It includes arable land, control over a lot of the water resources, the pleasant suburbs of the major cities in Israel, linked to them by superhighways and so on. Take over the Jordan Valley, from which Palestinians are by now pretty much excluded, and drive salients through the country. There are several breaking up the rest into pretty much unviable cantons. That way, Israel will take over about half the territory and integrate it into Israel. They have huge infrastructure projects for Israelis and visitors only, not for local people. So you can drive quite easily from Ma'ale Adumim, halfway into the West Bank to Tel Aviv, let's say, and not even seeing an Arab. You wouldn't know there is one, maybe some man up on a hill leading a goat or something like that. But and the remaining Arab population will they may have an economically sustainable existence, and in fact, in Ramallah, the elites may live pretty well, on foreign money and so on. But in theaters, concerts, sort of a Western-style life. But a neo-colonial arrangement with no prospects for any form of independent development. And the rest will drift away. And as far as Israel's concerned, that's fine. They don't want them. So there won't be a demographic problem. Too many Arabs in a Jewish state, and there won't be two states. That's the ongoing option. And there isn't going to be any handing over the keys. Israel's not going to take them. Meanwhile, Gaza will be kept separate from the West Bank. That's in violation of international agreements, but Israel and the U.S. have been dedicated since 1991, actually, to separate Gaza from the West Bank. By now it's a very sharp separation. Gaza will just stay an open-air prison, as it's often called.